What is the thing we don't talk about in your family? How my parents were able to afford a house suddenly while working a minimum wage job and having recently immigrated to America dirt poor. They would never tell me where they got the money from. My second cousin was always very introverted. Nobody ever really saw him, and he never really met anyone beyond immediate family due to him just not being interested in knowing any of us. He left home and cut everyone off. Hell, I had no idea he existed. Fast forward and my first cousin is excited to bring her husband to the family reunion. The two eloped, so we did not know who this mystery man was. She walks up and there's our second cousin with her. The older family members knew exactly who he was and, well, they were expecting and married. So we said fuck it and just had the family reunion. We don't mention the cousin thing because it's been acknowledged and we all decided to move past it as to not make them feel weird. I caught my parents smoking weed once when I was young, and one day, after I got yelled at for something threatened that I knew a secret that could tear this family apart. I just finished taking dare, so I thought that was a big deal. My parents flipped out. Turns out my dad was having an affair and my mom only had slight suspicions, and I brought the whole thing to light. The Thanksgiving meal prep where my mother got her hand stuck inside the frozen turkey for several hours. Bringing this one up gets you the laser beam eyes death glare. The friend of a close cousin who raped me. Everyone acts like it never happened. Better yet, he died a few years later, and they all were part of the big memorial that has become an annual thing. They even wear rubber bracelets for the fucker. Pretty much disowned all my family. Logistically, my sister's first child cannot possibly have been her husband's biological child, but he claimed the child as his own. They eloped about 6 weeks before he was born. There is no way he wasn't deployed when conception took place. She hasn't ever said a single word about it, but everyone knows. We are not sure if he's actually that bad at math. He is pretty dumb. Or if he didn't care. The time my mom was on Wheel of Fortune, it did not go well. Mom's side, my great uncle sexually assaulted my aunt when she was a child and seriously damaged her cervix. As a result, all of her children were seriously premature and some died as infants. Dad's side, my cousin murdered 2 people, but when he wasn't doing heroin and strangling women, he kept in touch with my mom and found the best bargains on small decorative porcelain houses for her. How sweet. That my family was very involved with a small 50 family top secret cult that included preparing for the end of the world and stockpiling canned goods and water in $1 million barn in the woods surrounded by small cabins. My parents got recruited for this cult when I was 4 years old and left when I was 15. It was our whole life. Everything revolved around it. All our money went into it. My parents can't talk about it. My mother flies into an insane rage. I've never told anyone the whole story start to finish. I doubt I ever will. I could write a book about the bizarre childhood I had. My grandfather had a lover 4 years before him, and my grandmother divorced. He started seeing her a few years before I was born. Right after the divorce was final, my grandma died from cancer and my grandpa married his old lover. She has a son. 2 years older than me. Looks just like him. No one has dared to ask any questions. When my grandmother was diagnosed with end-stage cancer, she offered to kill my father who was caught molesting me. My cousin who is a principal and was married with kids had an affair with a teacher. She was also married. They both ended both of their marriages and got together. The teacher was my math teacher at the time while this all happened. Now they are married and I see them at family reunions. Extremely awkward for me. I had 2 uncles. My uncle accidentally ran over his brother when they were in their 20s and drunk one night. The brother died a few days later. That's not talked about. Only found out from my aunt when she was under anesthesia and blurting out all kinds of shit. My grandpa used to molest children. I was never affected personally. Yet my family is so big on the idea of second chances and forgiveness that it's incredibly taboo to talk about and everyone is just keen to forget about it. My mother literally excused it by saying that he was too old and too physically incapable of it anymore, so it no longer matters. My parents were never actually married and played it off like they were for 20 plus years. Oh, and my dad cheated on my mom with a dude who dresses in drag for a living. That my mom had a baby at 17 and was forced to give it up for adoption. No one but a few people know. Even less who will talk about it. My mom has never recovered from being tricked into giving up her baby. The fact that my brother and I still keep regular contact with our former stepfather. He and our mom got divorced 3 years ago. My brother and I still attend holidays with his side of the family, occasionally grab dinner, and get along well with his new fiancée. We don't tell our mom about any of this, although she is aware that we still talk to him. I mean, the man helped raise us. And we don't hold any grudges against him. Neither of us were willing to throw that relationship away, simply because he and our mom weren't married anymore. My sister is really my stepsister. Didn't find out till I was like 35. The physical abuse we suffered as kids. Parents have no idea what we are talking about when we bring it up. A few suicidal attention signs many of us used over the years. Kids learn from parents. So when mom said some dark shit to manipulate us a few times, we caved. When we learned it was a bluff, we started doing it, and one of my siblings even cut themselves a few times to get to what they wanted. It's fucked up. Now my mom is in her 60s and has claimed if she goes blind she will kill herself. But that was a few years ago we last heard that claim. My cousin actually committed suicide last year and there has been no cries for attention or manipulation after that. Plus we are all grown now and know better. But it was an emotionally abusive and manipulative way to grow up. My sister's weight. Extremely touchy subject. She started putting on the pounds at about age 11 and hit 375 before graduating from high school, along with other eating disorder standbys like hoarding and hiding food and stealing money to buy it. Her efforts to lose weight included things like pinning swimsuit model pin-ups to the fridge for encouragement. It didn't help that she was emotionally fragile and had anger management issues. My parents apparently thought that they could avoid conflict by banning all discussion of the most visible symptom of her failed coping skills. Boy, were they wrong. They didn't tolerate the lying or the stealing. There was some memorable shouting, but there was absolutely no treatment for the actual addiction, the source of the conflict. We don't talk about the authentic shrunken heads my grandfather collected. They were buried with him. The fact that 4/6 children have left our parents' religion, which is a huge social stigma and personal disappointment for them. The bunny incident. So we had a bunny at our dad's house a few years ago. Its name was Wally. My dad has bad OCD, so he tried to wash it. For people who don't know, you don't wash bunnies. Spoiler alert. He died. When I was 8, until I was 10. I thought that the ghost of my grandparents' dog followed me around. I only ever imagined it, but the idea freaked my parents out. So they sent me to this kid therapy place. I don't know exactly what circumstances led to me being sent there, but I know that there were only a few sessions, and little progress was made. After one session, my dad told me to tell the therapist that I made everything up, and that I meant none of it. However, there was no further session for me to do this. I don't know why they ended. What specifically got me there in the first place. What the goal was. And why my dad suddenly wanted me to abruptly end the whole thing. What my parents never found out, I think, is that I also believed that I would legit gain superpowers. And this notion was connected to the ghost of my grandparents' dog. This whole time period is rather sensitive to me even now, because I ruined the social life for my young self until we moved to a different town for unrelated reasons, and I legitimately believed all of it. It scared my parents considerably that I might have some further undiagnosed mental disorder, though I'm fine now, as far as I know, and it's not something I can just brush off as kid stuff. There was some serious delusional shit going on. And just because the delusions were, obviously and expectedly, childish, doesn't mean that they weren't serious. It's really not something that I nor my parents want to bring up. How a group of my uncles and cousins, we are Latin. Our family is huge, beat a man to death in broad daylight. Cousin's husband slept with other family member, who was 16. He was twice the girl's age. She hates the girl now, but is still with her husband. We really don't want to talk about it. My mom had a half brother who was gay. My granddad, her father, kicked him out of the house when he was 18 after catching him with another man in the house. He died during the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, and my granddad didn't go to the funeral. I've only ever heard this story once from my mom. None of her sisters or my grandparents have ever mentioned it. I don't think I was ever supposed to know, but it makes me sad knowing I had an uncle that I cold related to, and I'll never get the chance to know him.